Thank you all for joining.
Good morning, Prabhu.
So this morning we'll continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. It seems the volume is a little strange. Is it better now, Kishori Dasi?
It's a little low.
It's low.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. I'll try to speak louder too. I'm a little soft spoken today. I'll try to pick it up. Okay, so continuing Srimad Bhagavatam, we're on the third canto, 9th chapter, text 14.
No, it's good. No, it's good.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Shashvat Svarupa Mahasaiva Nipita Bheda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Namah Parasmai Vishvo Bhava Stiti Layeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Nama Idam Chakrimeshvaraya Shashvat Svarupa Mahasaiva Nipita Bheda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Nama Parasmai Vishvodbhava Stiti Layeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Nama Idam Chakrimeshvaraya Shashvat Svarupa Mahasaiva Nipita Bheda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Nama Parasmai Vishvobhava Stiti Layeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Nama Idam Chakrameshvaraya. Please chant.
Sashvat Swarupa Mahasaiva Nipita Beda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Nama Parasmai Vishwadbhava Stiti Layeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Namaidam Chakrameswaraya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Shashat Sharupa Mahasaiva Nipita Bheda Mohaya Bodha Dhishanaya Namah Parasmai Vishad Bhava Sthiti Laeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Nama Idam Chakrasmeshwaraya. Hare Krishna.
Shashvat Swarupa Mahashaiva Nipita Beda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Nama Prasamai Vishvodabhava Sthiti La Yeshu Namitta Lila Rasayate Nama Idam Chakram Meshvarya.
Hare Krishna. Sashvat Swarupa Mahasaiva Nipita Bheda Mohaya Bodha Dishanaya Namaha Parasmai Vishvodabhava Sthiti Layeshu Nimitta Lila Rasayate Namahidam Chakrimeshwaraya.
Hare Krishna.
षट्षट्स्वरूपमहसेवन्तीतभेदा मोहाय बोधदीक्षणाय नमः परस्मै विश्वोद्वस्ति लयेषु लीला रासाय ते नमादं चक्रमीश्वराय हरे।
Anyone else? Okay. Shashvat, eternally. Svarupa, transcendental form. Mahasa, by the glories. Eva, certainly. Nipita, distinguished. Bheda, differentiation. Mohaya, unto the illusory conception. Bodha, self-knowledge. Dishanaya, intelligence. Namaha, obeisances. Parasmai, unto the transcendence. Vishva Udbhava, creation of the cosmic manifestation. Sthiti, maintenance. Layeshu, also destruction. Nimitta, for the matter of. Lila, by such pastimes. Rasaya, for enjoyment. Te, unto you. Namaha, obeisances. Idam, this. Chakrema, do I perform. Ishvaraya, unto the Supreme. Translation. This is Lord Brahma continuing his prayers to Lord Vishnu. Let me offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Transcendence, who is eternally distinguished by his internal potency. His indistinguishable impersonal feature is realized by intelligence for self-realization. I offer my obeisances unto him, who by his pastimes enjoys the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. Purport by Abhayacharana Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is eternally distinguished from the living entities by his internal potency, although he is also understood in his impersonal feature by self-realized intelligence. Devotees of the Lord therefore offer all respectful obeisances unto the impersonal feature of the Lord. The word rasa is significant herein. The rasa dance is performed by Lord Krishna in the company of the cowherd damsels at Vrindavan. And the personality of Godhead Garbhodakashaya Vishnu is also engaged in rasa enjoyment with his external potency, by which he creates, maintains, and dissolves the entire material manifestation. Indirectly, Lord Brahma offers his respectful obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna, who is factually ever engaged in rasa enjoyment with the gopis, as confirmed in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad in the following words. Parardhante sobudhyata gopavesho me purusha purastad avir babhuva. The distinction between the Lord and the living entity is definitely experienced where there is a sufficient intelligence to understand his internal potency, as distinguished from the external potency by which he makes possible the material manifestation. Translation again. Let me offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Transcendence, who is eternally distinguished by his internal potency. His indistinguishable impersonal feature is realized by intelligence for self-realization. I offer my obeisances unto him, who by his pastimes enjoys the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastabhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravan Pacharni Nirvishesha Shrunyavadi Paschati Deshatane Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Chapatitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Again, thank everyone for joining this morning. So we're talking about Leela Rasaya. Leela Rasaya appeared in today's verse. So we know the term Rasa Leela, right? And it may be strange to some of us to hear this term in such a verse describing Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, who is certainly part of Krishna, a part of Krishna. But generally, we don't think of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu as enjoying or relishing a pastime of creating, maintaining, and dissolving material manifestation, right? But the word is there. It's in the verse. Srila Prabhupada explains it. So rasa, it's the way that the Lord interacts with his various potencies under different circumstances. All right, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So in the verse again, the word used is Leela Rasaya, and in his purport, Srila Prabhupada continues to use the term rasa or enjoyment when describing Garbhodakashaya Vishnu's actions of creation, maintenance, and annihilation or dissolution of the cosmic manifestation or the material manifestation. So this may come as a surprise to some, because when we think of the term rasa, even as mentioned in the purport, we think of a very sweet and relishable pastimes, right? We think of the rasa dance, rasa leela, the Lord's enjoyable pastimes of dancing with the damsels of Vraj on a full moon night, right? This is what we think of when we hear rasa leela. But rasa is not the word most of us think of when we think of the material world, right? What words come to mind when thinking of the material world? I'll start, but if someone wants to add some, please, I'd like to hear them. So I think of suffering and struggle, hypocrisy and torment, prison, hell on earth. Are there any other words that come to mind when we think of the material world? Anyone?
Temporary.
What was it? Temporary? Yeah. Good. Any more?
Duality.
Duality. Good one. Anything else? So,
Temporary.
what was it?
Temporary.
Temporary. Good, good. Yes. So, rasa wasn't on that list. Now, we could add hopeful, second chance, place of reform, even merciful. We could even add that if we have somewhat of an understanding. But enjoyable isn't usually on that list unless it's accompanied by another word that describes its flickering and fickle nature, right? So some people will say, well, it's sometimes enjoyable or somewhat enjoyable. But generally enjoyable. It's not really going to be on that list when we think about the material world. And sometimes we hear this word Leela being used when people ask why the material world is full of suffering, and why God would make a place with so many problems, right? So I've heard this many times where someone who's either unable or unwilling to give a full and satisfying answer says, they just say it's Leela, right, with no further explanation, right? People will talk about how the material world, there's so much suffering going on from so many different angles. You have the suffering that's coming from your own self. You have suffering that's being brought upon you by others. And then you have the suffering that's the natural occurrences, right? The divine, um, um, anyway, the threefold miseries there, Adi Bhuta, Adi Daiva, and Adi Atmika, right? So, so many. And so oftentimes we hear this question because it's an obvious question, right? If God exists, why does such a terrible place exist, right? Especially if he's all loving and all powerful, right? So it's a common question. And sometimes, and I've heard this many times, someone just says, it's his Leela, it's his pastime, right? And for me, that's a very unsatisfying answer. I'm not satisfied by that answer, right? But um, yeah, because also the reason why it's unsatisfying is because without further explanation, we just assume that, you know, God likes suffering, right? Because we're talking about the question is, God exists, why is this world so terrible? And then if the only answer is it's his Leela, his pastime, then we think, oh, well, so does he enjoy this then? He enjoys making us suffer, right? So that's why it's a dissatisfying answer without context. But there is some truth to it, right? Although it's incomplete in itself, it's not a wrong answer per se. But without context, it can give this impression that God is unfair. He's not very good at planning. Uh, and he maybe is even a bit or a lot sadistic, right? Uh, all of this is just a careless game to him, right? We picture, when we think of the material world and think of the idea of it being God's play, his enjoyable pastime, we think of, we all knew that kid in school who was cruel. Um, the ones that would, rip the wings off of flies, or they'd get their magnifying glass and hold it in such a way that the sun hits it and the sun's light concentrates and they would just, burn ants on the sidewalk, things like that. We've all met that person. And we don't think that God would be like that, right? We think that God would be compassionate. He wouldn't just as a matter of play, try to do something like that. Now, if there's a responsible adult around when they see the child, burning ants on a sidewalk, they're gonna intervene with that. They're not gonna say, "Oh no, it's just kids playing." Kids will be kids. No, they're gonna say, "Hey, these are living entities. This isn't okay." Because of course this sort of behavior can lead to other types of violence. Anyway, so it's hard to come to terms with, but as I said, it's not necessarily wrong. There's some truth to it, right? So, and the truth of it, um, uh, it is actually quite enjoyable and relishable when we actually understand it, right? For Krishna. Now, out of context, we can't see how that's even possible, but we're going to get into that. But actually, before we get deeper into that, I want to mention something else that comes up in this verse in purport. Um, and it's how the internal potency is distinctively different from the external potency, right? And that's super easy to understand. Everything in the spiritual world is harmonious. There's no quarrel. Everything is peaceful. No one is exploited. No one's forced to do anything. The happiness of everyone is ever increasing, right? And that's a stark contrast to what we experience here in this material world, right? So it's obvious that there's a huge difference between the internal potency and the external energy, right? And although these two potencies are quite different, they come from the same place and they're under the expert guidance of the same person. So although they're quite distinct, they certainly have the most major aspect in common. So It's no surprise that since they have the same source and the same operator, the motive or the mood would also be similar, right? So back to rasa. Even we materially conditioned souls understand that dancing around with one's loved ones is relishable. But again, most of us would not use the word relishable or enjoyable to describe what we have experienced in this material world. So, why is it that Garbhodakashaya Vishnu enjoys his pastime of creating, maintaining, and dissolving the material manifestation? Especially when it's completely populated with people who are trying to forget that he even exists, right? It doesn't sound like it would be relishable for either party. So on our side, we're not having much fun. The words we use to describe the material world aren't enjoyable or relishable. Not anything that we would consider as pastime. And from his side, he's dealing with a whole bunch of people who are trying to forget about him, who are exploiting all of the resources, uh, and even one another. And so it doesn't sound fun for either party, honestly, right? So it is tough to comprehend. But as the verse and the purport mention, it is possible to understand by self-realized intelligence, right? Until we cultivate that intelligence, everything will continue to be utterly confusing and frustrating, and we will continue to be unable to distinguish reality from illusion, right? And this is it. When we can't distinguish reality from illusion, nothing makes sense because we're experiencing an illusion, right? Illusions don't make sense. They're not actually real, right? But Lord Brahma, as shown in his prayers here, he sees that the very same person who is enjoying those pleasurable pastimes with his most intimate devotees, reciprocating their pure love for him, is also enjoying his pastimes of facilitating those of us whose pure love is covered over by our desire to independently lord it over material nature. And he's giving us the opportunity to redirect our motives back to its pure state. So the common factors are his unconditional love for all of his parts and parcels, and his willingness to reciprocate accordingly with each of us while patiently honoring our free will, right? So whether it's the internal potency or the external potency, the common factors are that he has unconditional love for all of his parts and parcels, and he's willing to reciprocate accordingly with each of us while honoring our free will, right? So the reason that the internal potency looks so different from the external energy, it has everything to do with us, right? This material world is what it looks like when people without the capacity to independently control things try to take control, right? We have no business trying to do this. We don't have the capacity. And so chaos ensues, right? But as far as the Lord is concerned, this is just a temporary setback for a whole lot of people, but still, it's just a temporary setback. And he's happy to oblige our tantrums and patiently await our return to him. So, yes, although the different pastimes are quite distinct between the internal and external potency, it's the same person accomplishing the same task, right? Krishna is allowing us to interact with him in whichever way we choose, right? If we choose to interact with him favorably, then it makes sense that we can be in an environment where everyone is doing that, right? And so it's all harmonious. Everything is working accordingly. And no one's doing anything they don't want to do. And everyone's enjoyment is increasing at every moment, right? Uh, but those of us who try to interact with him in a different way, thinking or considering ourselves to be independent from him, not understanding that we are parts and parcels, uh, then we have to experience our pastimes in a different environment, right? Because we wouldn't fit in the spiritual world if we think we're the center. The spiritual world means Krishna's the center, everybody knows it, and everybody's happy about it, right? But when we, rebellious jivas, misuse our free will and misidentify, so the real identity or real ego is I am eternally servant of Krishna, part and parcel. Same qualities, much different quantity, right? That's the real identity or the real ego. But then we have the false ego. That's when we misuse our free will and we identify as independent from Krishna. So those of us who have done that, we find ourselves in the external energy, where we are under the illusion that we are the center. Everything we experience is centered around our own, our senses, our faculties of intelligence and knowledge acquiring senses, etc. We see the world as how it can serve us. And that's our experience here, which is why it's temporary, miserable, suffering, because we're eternal beings in a temporary place. We can't expect to be happy. We can't expect to relish the pastime of it all, right? Because we're not actually seeing it as it is. We're seeing it through the very distorted and dirty lens of the illusion of us being the center, right? So we're not experiencing things as they're actually going on. So this is the common factor. Krishna is allowing us to interact with him in whichever way we choose. So it's all on us, right? And while he arguably would prefer dancing over sprouting universes out of his navel and watching us exploit one another, his love is unconditional in both scenarios, and he is reciprocating fairly in both scenarios, right? So for those of us who think that it's not fair, there's some news. It's actually quite fair when we consider what it is we did to come here and how we're actually not in actual danger being here. We experience all kinds of danger, all kinds of suffering, all kinds of hurt, all kinds of torment. But that's all illusory. It's temporary. The soul, it can't be burned by fire, can't be moistened by water, can't be withered by the wind. We're unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. We cannot die. So although we are, and there's no doubt we are experiencing these torments, they're not eternally affecting us. They can't, right? And the only reason we're experiencing them is because we're identifying with the illusion, and that is what is causing us to feel this torment. So it's the example given is that of a dream. If we dream that we're being chased by a tiger, and we wake up and we're afraid, the fear is real, the sweat on our head is real, right? The anxiety, all of that is real. We're actually experiencing all of that. But it's based on the illusion of the dream where we thought we were being chased by a tiger when we were actually safe home in bed, right? So in a very similar way, all the torment that we are experiencing in this material world, since it's based on something that's not actually there, although it feels quite real to us, it doesn't actually have a tangible effect. It has an experienced effect on us, 100%, no denying that. But it's not actually tangibly affecting us, right, in reality. So again, all of our experienced suffering, it's of our own doing, right? That misuse of free will. And the beauty of it is that all of it will end in a moment when we redirect our consciousness from self-centric to Krishna-centric. right? But without this self-realized intelligence, which is mentioned in this verse and purport, we're looking at the material world. Uh, when we look at the material world and we look at the description of the spiritual world, we can't even imagine that the same person is behind those, like the same artist and the same creator. We can't fathom that. It's difficult, right? It can't possibly be the same person, we might think. So imagine going to a museum and looking at an exhibit, and there are these beautiful, breathtaking paintings that invoke passion, inspiration, um, upliftment. You've never seen anything like them before. They bring out so many things inside of us that we didn't even know were there, and we're looking at these beautiful paintings in awe. And the more we look at them, the more we see, and the more uplifted we feel. So imagine that we see that, and we're just completely flabbergasted by the beauty of this artwork. And then as we make our way down looking at these different paintings, then we see this, what looks to be an unfortunate accident or a disaster of like horrid smelling sludge haphazardly dumped over a canvas, and it's dripping onto the floor, and it's causing the marble tiles to just rapidly erode while emitting these noxious fumes, right? We wouldn't consider that the same artist could be behind the two different displays, right? That inspiring and beautiful painting, and then we see this what looks like an accident, and it's a terrible one, and it keeps getting worse. And if you stick around too long, you're probably gonna, you know, die from inhaling these fumes. So we wouldn't think that the same person is behind both of those displays, right? But Lord Brahma, he sees it, right? And if we cultivate this science of self-realization under understanding Krishna's actual position, as well as our own actual position, the relationship between us, and then start actually acting favorably according to that relationship, then we too will be able to describe the interactions from our side as enjoyable and relishing, right? So from Krishna's side, it's always relishable. For us, it depends on how we're using our free will, right? If we don't see things as they are, we are experiencing suffering. And if we are seeing things as they are, then we're blissful. It's as simple as that. So, in summary, Krishna doesn't enjoy our suffering. He's not a sadist. He patiently waits for us to return to our true nature so that when we do go back to him, it won't be a pale experience like a part of a machine. It'll be a relishable experience full of enjoyable personal interactions. And he very much enjoys when a rebellious soul turns back to him of their own accord. Right? So this is what Lord Brahma understood and is now appreciating in his prayers. So let's stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Would anyone like to add anything? No, of course not, because everyone thinks, of course, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, you would use the term Leela Rasaya. Of course he's enjoying.
Yes, Prabhu, we are enjoying Krishna's Leelas. So no words for that.
It took me by surprise anyway, but it was it was explained quite clearly. And the reason it took me by surprise is because so many times I've heard that unsatisfying answer of it's just his Leela, with no
Yeah.
other context. And I always thought, what are you talking about? It's just his Leela. But when we do understand this science of self-realization, then we actually can see how it is his Leela, how, he has these living entities, most of them, most of his part and parcels, voluntarily and blissfully engaged just directly in his service. And so that there they are in that internal potency in the spiritual world, and they're, in their natural position, enjoying quite, you know, intensely and ever increasingly. Um, but then you have, the minority of the jivas who thought, well, yeah, okay, that might be good, but might also be nice to try to, be the center, right? And so here we are. And so from Krishna's point of view, since he has unconditional love for us, he allows us to think and act in that way for as long as we want until we, and I don't like this term, come to our senses, because senses are external, but until we reawaken to our original position, our consciousness. Uh, and so to him, yeah, it's an enjoyable pastime. And although on our end we're suffering like anything, in the
Um,
grand scheme of things, we're not actually, you know, tangibly suffering. So yeah, he's just enjoying watching us um reawaken our original nature, right? And so for him, that's just part of the pastime. So he's just reciprocating how we're dealing with him, whether it's the spiritual world or the material world.
Haribol Prabhu, I'm
Yes,
just
Hare Krishna.
thinking that Krishna is, you know, everything is created, even the, whatever. But why he gave us this independence so that we can act against him?
You want to know why he gave us independence?
Yeah.
Hmm, that's a good question. And so, and we touched on that a little bit in the discussion today, is because if there's not a choice to either, and anyway, if you take the independence away, and it means that basically it's just a machine, it's an impersonal machine. And although it's working nicely, you're not really getting any enjoyment out of that because there's no other option. Things are just, they're parts. They're not people, they're just parts. They're parts of a working machine. That's not relishable. What makes it relishable is when these parts choose to be part of that machine and are voluntarily cooperating and exchanging this love, right? That's where the exchange of love comes in. If there's no independence, there is no love, right? It's just a default setting of a machine that runs. So this is why there has to be independence, and it should be a choice. I oftentimes bring this up because early on, I would often pray, Krishna, I know for a fact that you are the supreme controller, and I know I'm misusing my free will. So just take it away from me. I'm using it irresponsibly. So just take it away. I'm giving you permission. I'm using my free will to give you permission to just take it away and bring me back to you. And what I didn't understand when I was making that prayer is that I I was asking just to become nothing. I was asking to take away my individuality, because if I truly knew that Krishna was the supreme and that I wanted to serve him, I would give up all my material attachments and actually serve him, right? That's love. That's what's relishable. Having the option to not do it, but still decide to do it, that's what makes it relishable, right? So this independence has to be there. Otherwise, everything's boring. It's just a part of a machine, right? There's no other option. It's just there it is. It's installed, right? The gears in a clock aren't experiencing bliss. Like, they're serving their purpose, right? They're telling time. But if there's no one there to relish knowing the right time, and the gears aren't conscious, there's nothing there, right? So that's why it's very important. It's essential, actually, for this independence to be there. It's not essential for us to misuse our independence, but we did. So we deal with what we have. So if we cultivate this self-realized intelligence, as mentioned in today's verse, then the illusion is taken away. This chanting Hare Krishna, the Cheto Darpana Margin, it removes this covering, and we can actually start seeing through the illusion to reality. We see the reality now. And when we see reality, we actually start acting properly, right? According to our actual position instead of according to the position that we're falsely identifying with. Does that make sense? Is that a satisfactory answer of why independence has to be there?
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand it. We know Krishna just need our love. It should be voluntary.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, he doesn't need anything, but you know, it's relishable on both sides when we choose to serve him favorably, right? He appreciates it, we appreciate it. And that's what life is all about. It's all about love, right? It's not about being efficient, right? So he's a person, we are people. So the interaction should be there. Okay, Baba Grahi Janardhan Prabhu, you have your hand up. Thank you for patiently waiting.
Thank you for taking my question / feedback. So at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, and I'm paraphrasing here, Krishna basically says, like, I've told you everything. Do with it as you please, right? Like, he gives us that independence. He says, I've already taught you everything that you need. Just do with it what you will, basically. And you know, that independence is, as we were just talking about it, it also reminds me of like that parent that drills into you, like, hey, you're messing up. You can't do this. Don't hang out with those people. Stop it. You're screwing up, you know? And then finally they just say, you know what? Do whatever you want. And after doing that, at least for me, you know, as I was growing up, I would tune my parents out. I thought I knew everything, right? And it was only till you kind of hit rock bottom, right, that you figure out, like, wow, I am messing up. They were right. I've been a failure. And I guess because we're so hard-headed, we need that. And I think Krishna knows that. He can tell us and guide us all we want, but until we figure out for ourselves, it's worthless. I don't know if that was the right thing to take from it, but that's kind of what I got today.
Absolutely. That's a very good thing to take from it today. Yeah, because the thing is this, if we're forced to do something, even if we still have our free will, if we're forced to do something from our parents or teachers or peers or whatever, in our mind, we're still going to be focused on doing the wrong thing. So it has to be our choice to give up that thing. You know, it's up to us to actually understand why it's bad for us and then voluntarily give it up. Otherwise, we're not really giving it up. It's Palgo Vairagya. We're giving it up externally, but we're meditating on it completely, right? And so the first opportunity we're going to get, we're going to be jumping right back into those old habits. And that's not what we're looking for. And that's not what Krishna wants. He doesn't want us to feel like we're being forced to love him because we're not. We're not forced to love him. It's our natural position, yeah. And when we get to that state, return to that state, it's eternal. It's fully cognizant. There's nothing that we won't be aware of, and it's completely blissful and it's ever increasing. All of that, right? So, yeah. But in the meantime, you know, we made our choice, and we have to decide for ourselves to make the right choice. Otherwise, it's not. Yeah, as you were saying, it's, you know, it's all the guidance, but he will not force us to do anything because that's not love. Love isn't forcing, right? Love is natural. So thank you for that. I'm glad that you brought up the end of the 18th chapter. That's a very good parallel to today. Is there anything else? Doesn't seem that way. Okay. So we can stop here. Thank you all again for joining. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Manchkalpa Vishak Kripa Sindhu
Tobhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for a nice class. Lot of things about Krishna we need to do. That parental thing, that's what I was about to tell you. We tell kids a lot of things. They don't listen until they burn their hand. That is fire, don't touch it. They want to experience. So a lot of times it happens. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.